Beyond and hello, everyone. My name is Jonathon Dornbush, and this is Podcast Beyond, episode 662 of IGN's weekly PlayStation show. I'm joined this week by Brian Altano.
Hello.
And Max Scoville.
Beyonzo and Begonzo, and welcome once more to the radio time.
And all you listeners and viewers out there, please keep track of all of our dangling participles throughout the course of the show, as we'll be asking for a final tally for next week's episode.
Right before we started recording, Jonathan said dangling participle. Did I say it right?
Yeah,
participle.
Participle.
Participle. And I realized I hadn't heard that in like 15 years. And now I've said it and heard it like 7 times in 5 minutes.
What is that?
Sound off in the comments below with a few dangling participles.
What is that? I never learned that. I think I was in dumb kids English class.
I think we should have the viewers and listeners write in also, because if I say the definition slightly wrong, someone's going to actually me. And I don't know if I want to put myself out there for that right now, because self-esteem. Anyway, we will have plenty of subject-verb agreement to talk about this episode, but we will also be talking about the next-gen console race as it goes on. Every time I mention a part of speech, my girlfriend gives me side-eye across the room. Even though I had put out a call actually before this episode mentioning, hey, there's not a lot of PlayStation news this week, and there still isn't, but there is some big next-gen launch news, especially for this holiday season, that we can talk about. So I definitely want to jump into that. But I did want to mention, if you're just joining us this week and you happen to have missed it, we did record a second episode last week going over the state of play, which aired last Thursday, August 6th. So if you happen to have missed that episode, it is in the feeds on YouTube, on IGN, on your podcast services. You can hear all of our thoughts on what worked, what didn't, and what we hope to see in the future from state of play in that episode. But I do want to jump into what is the biggest next-gen news, and it's not PlayStation 5 related exactly, but I do think it will have an impact on PS5 going into this fall, and that is, of course, the news that broke just a little bit before we started recording, which is the fact that Halo Infinite has been delayed into 2021. It's no longer set for a day-and-date release with the Xbox Series X. So its Xbox One and PC versions are also coming out next year. Alongside that, Microsoft did, kind of to help soften the blow, I think, mentioned, oh, but by the way, it's coming in November. Again, not an exact date, but narrowing it down to a month. And surprise, surprise, it's November. But they also did sort of mention, they kind of outlined what their plans are for the launch window. So they said, there will be over 100 Xbox Series X optimized titles in between games that are made exclusively for next gen and PC, or for games that are made for Xbox One as well, that will have like Series X improvements. And of course, they're also touting the fact that they have 4 generations of backward compatibility. And so you can play thousands of games at launch. I do want to get to sort of the way that they're framing the entirety of all of this stuff, but I do want to take a look specifically at Halo at first. They gave some explanation for it, essentially saying there's been a number of factors that caused the delay, and one of them, of course, being the impact of COVID-19 on working from home and having to deal with such a big title from home. Obviously, 343 is a huge studio, and I think a lot of the discussion we've seen since this announcement has definitely been a whole trying to get in the first take of whether or not this is good for Microsoft, bad for Microsoft, good for Halo, bad for Halo, good for Sony, bad for Sony. I think we've seen like everyone trying to jump the gun on whether or not it is good or bad, and I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. I definitely want to hear both of your thoughts about it, because I've been thinking to myself, of course, for the last few hours. But Brian, how did you take this announcement? I think in terms of what it means for Xbox this fall and what it means for PlayStation this fall.
So obvious caveat: I'm not a big Halo guy. That said, I am a big video game guy, and I love console launches. I'm fascinated in the ebb and flow between large swaths of dedicated consumers becoming not so dedicated and hopping from platform to platform. The sort of like, the turns throughout the time of how people have gravitated towards systems and made them the dominant launch console is always interesting to me. My immediate reaction was like, this really sucks. Not even because I had any full intention of playing this at launch, although I do have intention of buying a Series X on day one. But because this, I think, this changes the conversation around launch consoles, launch games. It changes the conversation around a justification people might have to gravitate towards this system, which I think deflates competition a little bit. And I think competition is a tremendously important thing in this and every medium. And so it's kind of a bummer. It is interesting though, because I do think that like it opens up a different outlet for Microsoft, as you can see they're already doing with that press release this morning or this afternoon, which will try to differentiate their presence this November against PlayStation's. I think PlayStation is going to be like, this is this big, gigantic, shiny new thing with exclusive games and Spider-Man. And Microsoft's is going to be like thousands, hundreds, millions. They're going to say, like, with PlayStation, they're going to be like, we have, this is, this must have individual detail, this thing, this game, this moment, this controller, this new design. And Microsoft is going to go, we have so much stuff. Just tons and tons of stuff. And so I think it'll be sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. Historically, if you look back, especially this generation, launch games sucked. Like,
yeah,
like there was really not a lot going on. Switch launch
Resogun was the best exclusive for PS4.
The best exclusive there. The Xbox One, which rolled out with a litany of its own personal problems, launched with exclusives. Like there was a Forza, obviously. There was Dead Rising 4.
Yeah.
There was Killer Instinct, like big stuff, but not
Loco
really, like,
Cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Not really like stuff that's like, swing for the fences, be the first to 10 million type of situation. And so, yeah, I want both of these systems to succeed. I don't want another, I don't want a blowout. I don't want to see one of these things just go the, direction of the Wii U or go where there's, a 100 million, a console sort of split between the two, because I want them to be neck and neck. I want them to be close. Obviously, I don't think they will be. I do think that PlayStation will probably become the dominant thing this generation. But I think this is a big blow to people who want to play a brand new Halo this fall. For lapsed players, for hardcore players, like this is a big recognizable franchise. It's going to become better once it gets delayed. Most games do, but this is a big blow.
Yeah. Max, what did you think?
Yeah, I think that, again, looking at last gen, it seemed like these were two consoles directly competing with each other. And I think this time around, it's like we're seeing console versus ecosystem. Like Microsoft is very much basically trying to get people into the Xbox space, whether that is, Xbox One, Xbox One X, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, like whatever it is. If they get you in there and they get you on Game Pass, then, they kind of hooked you. And that's great. Obviously, having a killer app is a huge thing when you have a console at launch. And I feel like really, Spider-Man Miles Morales is cool, but I honestly, it doesn't seem like there's really much on either side at this point. Like I was honestly like pretty curious about Halo Infinite, and that's as a guy who typically really isn't into Halo. But the idea of like, hey, here's a new Xbox console. We're coming out swinging with effectively a sort of soft reboot, Force Awakensing of this beloved Microsoft franchise. And now it's being sort of pushed. And I think the big takeaway here is that, like, I think that, looking at just sort of side by side, you've got this pretty, sizable family of Xbox consoles. And it seems like there's like definitely a lot more, there's a lot more choice, like if you want to jump into that whole ecosystem and play the hottest new Series X games, you can theoretically do that with, the budget priced Xbox Series S model that comes out. Not even Series S, the Xbox One S. Like you can get the cheapest possible bundle and play the games that are going to be launching on the Series X, because they've said at launch they're not going to be having a bunch of like first party exclusives that are locked into one new console, which is kind of weird to think about because the PS5 is going to come out and there are going to be some like brand new only on PlayStation 5 kind of games. But that I don't know. I think that there's it seems like Xbox is playing a much like a longer game. It's the long con. So
yeah, they're totally playing two different games, and that's what's going to be weird going into this next gen, is because I think like our standard ways of looking at what success is aren't going to mean the same thing going into next gen, where like if the PS5 happens to sell more in its first year than the Series X and Series S, Microsoft may still be able to say, hey, yeah, but we added 15 million Game Pass subscribers this year, so we're making a ton of money that way. And that's not something that's easily quantifiable to PS Plus right now, or even to PS Now. Right. Just in terms of what the focus for the companies are. Yeah, we're going to be looking at a very different generation going into it. And I agree with both of you. Like they're playing different games, and it's going to take time for our vocabulary and the way that the industry at large looks at that and looks at what is working and what isn't working and kind of gets a handle on that.
It's going to be weird if they look at Xbox as one cohesive ecosystem or one player base, because technically I could be wrong here, but I'm guessing that people on Series X can play games with people on, Xbox One.
As far as we know, yeah.
Yeah, right. But we don't know what's going on with PS4 and PS5. And like, I feel like Sony's going to be like, we have this many. I mean, they're probably still going to say like this many active PSN users, but in the same way that we saw that, like those numbers of like the number of people, playing PS4 online, or like number of PlayStation Plus subscribers, like when you start kind of, I guess, adding more SKUs and kind of moving the goalposts, there's just, it's different ways of making your number sound bigger. And if you're counting everybody who's under the Xbox roof as being like, this is all the people playing on Xbox. Is everybody playing on Xbox Live? That's going to be a much larger number than being like, hey, here's everybody playing on PlayStation 5, whatever that means,
Yeah, for sure. I think at least right off the bat, like if we clock the numbers in January, right, of 2021, there will be more people on Game Pass as a whole than owners of the PlayStation 5, right? And that is an interesting metric to compare those things, but that's absolutely true. On the flip side, that doesn't necessarily mean that's where developers are going to start gravitating towards, developing towards. The thing is, like, I keep hearing and keep saying that Microsoft is playing a different game here. It is true, but in the meantime, in the short term, for the average consumer, I don't think they really care. I think that like the Game Pass is an exceptional value. I think it's awesome. I wish Sony kicked PS Now in the ass and really made it something that like could compete, because I think they really could if they spent a couple of weekends on it, like just turned it into something that's like, like they're sitting on something right now where they can be like, oh, you guys like Game Pass? Well, we have that with PlayStation first party stuff, like,
and there's also the elephant in the room is xCloud, which is
right.
If somebody tells somebody that they can play the hottest new Xbox games with their phone, like that's suddenly kind of a different conversation
with some of their phones.
With I don't know what kind of phone they have. This hypothetical person, they could have an Android phone.
Not if
they don't have an iPhone, they're not playing it, unfortunately.
It is it's this weird thing where like on the services front, there's no contest. Like Microsoft is kicking Sony's ass when it comes to offering value in Game Pass. Friend of the show, ex-person on the show, Alana Pierce, put up like a very good rant video about that a couple weeks ago, where just like it is such an astounding deal to be getting right now, when we also talk about how greedy the big publishers can be and how much they're trying to nickel and dime us with microtransactions. It's like, here's a way to just get a bunch of games for a very small fee every month, and it is a really great deal. But yeah, like as you were saying, Brian, it is I don't know if the general audience, like they really need to push communicating that if they want to succeed, because I have an Xbox. I'm a subscriber to Game Pass. I have bought games on sale on the PSN and forgotten about that, and they've been on Game Pass, but I just bought them because I'm primarily on my PS4. And like, if it will be a mindshare thing, and having that box, no matter how strange you think it looks, on right next to your TV going into next year and going into the next few years, might really make the difference when it comes to who's gonna win out console sales wise.
Right, and Halo Infinite was deeply connected in Game Pass. That was a day one Game Pass game. And so I think a lot of people, they're going to be like, we still have Game Pass, but it's like, yeah, the value of that program just decreased slightly without that game being there. And so I do think it impacts. And so where I think the conversation has to shift for Microsoft to compete with Sony, and then thus for Sony to compete back with Microsoft, is two things. One, Microsoft really rings the bell on Game Pass in general, which we're talking about. But two, they need to actually be able to prove to consumers, assuming this is actually what happens, that the Series X is the best place to play third-party games outside of, PC. Like if they can go, like this is a very old school, like Atari did this back in the 80s. They put up magazine ads with some, butthead in a suit and tie standing on a TV. And he's like, we heard you like baseball, but like, this is like in television, like you got to do that. And so if they can come out and go, all the big, like Assassin's Creed, Cyberpunk, all that kind of stuff. Well, not Cyberpunk, because that's not really, we'll see where that one goes. If they can prove to audiences that everything looks and plays best on the Series X, then maybe they have some leverage over Sony in that department. Because in terms of launch games, I don't think they do. In terms of first party lineup for the foreseeable future, obviously that's preferences, but I'm always going to go with Sony on that one. And so I don't know if that's even possible to do, because like third-party launch games in general, and especially games released in the year of a first system, are always a little rough around the edges, and it's always hard to say. This time around, for this generation, PlayStation launched by saying, or by the game saying basically, these look best here, and then halfway through the generation, the Xbox One X stepped in and said, no, they look best here. But I think the ship had already sailed in terms of consumers by then, and people were already sort of embedded in the system they wanted to be in. But if they go, this is the best place to play third-party games, and we could prove it, then they might have something. But if not, I think people are going to continue to go to Sony.
Yeah, it's a big part of it is, of course, where people's friends go, and at the end of the day, especially in this year, that's going to come down a lot to price. Like
Right.
We were talking a little bit before the show. I don't think this means like Xbox is dead in the water. I think anyone proclaiming like, oh, suddenly the Xbox has no chance this generation, I don't think it means that, but I do think it's a really big dent to the competition that could happen at the beginning of this generation. And unless there is a major difference between the price points, Brian, you've mentioned it a few times, Sony has Spider-Man, and like outside of talking about games every day like we do on the show, we cover them every day. You obviously listen to the show, or you go to IGN, or wherever you consume games content. Spider-Man is the biggest Marvel character. Him leaving the MCU was like the most tragic news we could have ever covered somehow. Like that news was so big on IGN, it was like daunting to the audience, and then he was back in and nothing mattered. But like Spider-Man matters so much to the general audience and the general populace, and people love him so much. And so when you tell people, like you were saying before the show, Brian, like this is the only place to play a new Spider-Man, this is the only place you can do that. And maybe there's there have been rumors that there'll be like an port version of the PS4 Spider-Man, but like they can tout a combo pack, or the best place to play it, or like here's a new slightly up-res version of it, like whatever. But here is a new Spider-Man game that is going to matter to a lot of people who don't follow games every day, wanting to go buy a console.
It is the sequel or semi-sequel to the second best-selling PS4 game. Like, and it stars the most pop culturally iconic superhero on planet Earth in 2020. Like, I think some people are like, they're getting lost in the woods. They're being like, oh, it's just 10-hour DLC, or like Miles Morales is less popular than regular Spider-Man. It's going to say Spider-Man in the box. There's going to be a huge picture of Spider-Man, and it's going to say PS5 in the corner. And people are going to be like, it'll be the best-selling launch game, like by far of any console. Of the two launching, it'll be the best-selling launch game. I don't know if it'll outsell, something like Breath of the Wild, which literally outsold the Switch somehow. Well, I know how. I bought it physically and digitally. And there are plenty of idiots like me. But Miles Morales will be by a large margin the best-selling new console launch game. I mean, check back in January and tell me if I'm wrong, but like I won't be.
Yeah, no, it's nuts to think about how big of a factor that will be. And without, Halo is such a recognizable franchise, so to have that there day and date does matter, even if it's playable on PC, even if it's playable on Xbox One. Like having that as the Series X reason to buy this console makes so much sense. And like obviously they can still tout, you can play Game Pass, you can play thousands of games via backward compatibility, but like unless they can definitively show every third-party game plays and looks better on Series X, there's not if you have a PC, if you have an Xbox One, there is not a reason this fall to go buy a Series X in my mind.
Right.
Like it's just.
I would say counterpoint. Like there's a good reason to wait.
Yeah.
Like that almost shows. Like I mean, obviously Microsoft is delaying it for their own reasons, but like if you've got between $400 and $600 in your pocket or whatever the hell it is, and you go into the store and it's like, okay, like you've got two machines here. One of them plays a bunch of brand new games and it looks wacky and it's it's a new thing. It's a new number up, and the other one is like, this is the most powerful thing ever, but its big, huge flagship title doesn't come out till next year. And also, like, it doesn't really have any massive launch titles. Then, like, I think that it's basically being like, okay, yeah, like it'll still be there. Like you can get a Series X in like 6 months and it's, there'll be more on it, so I don't know.
I mean, their long game here is basically like when a baseball team gets a whole bunch of rookies. And they go, we're gonna nurture these players. We're gonna build them up, and 5 or 6 years from now, we're gonna have this like unstoppable force. Or maybe 3 or 4 years from now, which is great. But that doesn't really do anything for fans in the stands this fall. And so I think that's what makes it kind of different. And it's absolutely rare that you'll get a sports metaphor out of me on this show. Or
yeah, I was going to say, I don't really understand these words you're saying.
He watched a couple trailers for MLB The Show, and so he,
I got hit in the baseball in the head with a baseball once. No, so I do think that like one of the things that was sort of interesting about the last few days, not to make this like an Xbox show, but the Series X/Series S controller leaked. It was, I believe, stolen from the back of stores during riots in Chicago, among other places.
Wow.
Yeah, street dates were broken.
2020.
Yep. Yeah. Pictures of it out in the wild, fully rotating. It is, functionally identical to the current system, blah, 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 or current controller. It's got a new button, better, sort of improved latency, stuff like that, slightly better feel. But interesting thing on it was in the corner of it, it said that the warranty for it would be up November 6, 2021. And so going by a 1-year warranty, that would mean hypothetically that the Series X and Series S could launch November 5th or 6th this year. And so for Microsoft saying November today, I think what's interesting about that is, will Sony come in before that or after that? And part of me thinks that they'll give Microsoft like a week or two head start, and they'll show up just in time for Black Friday and just kind of obliterate the rest of the year. I think that's like, what were you going to say?
I'm looking at the calendar. November 5th and 6th are Thursday and Friday. So those are very good likely days. They're also, and I'll say this, a few days after Election Day, which obviously only matters for North America, for the US, but the US, of course, is a big region for that. And people are probably,
so does the Xbox.
Yeah. But just hopefully, people have other stuff going on earlier in the week to focus on. So I think launching before then is a bit of a weird time, but that week makes a lot of sense. But then 2 weeks after is Assassin's Creed and Cyberpunk week, and then whatever else gets announced for then. So there's the week of the 9th to the 13th, which, if they launch Thursday or Friday is the 12th or 13th. I think that's not a bad window. It gives Xbox a week, but gives you a week before the big games come out. It gives you 2 weeks before the Black Friday rush. It's a reasonable time to come out that month, like unless they're surprising us with a very late November or an October launch, which I don't think is the case. I think that week probably makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to go the same day. I don't know about you guys, but that just seems like too much.
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
I hope not. I really hope not. I mean, but maybe.
Yeah. It'd be an interesting, I'd feel a lot of sympathy for anyone who has to work a job that day. Well, I think, I feel a lot of sympathy for anybody that has to, work in any store right
in 2020,
now.
honestly.
No, absolutely.
But I do think that's an interesting wrinkle to things too. I mean, you're likely not going to have traditional midnight launches, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people are lined up outside of the bank right now, so who knows? That looks.
The lines are going to look extra long because everyone's got to stand further apart than normal.
True.
That's true. They will physically be longer, so even if they're short, they will look like there's a lot of people there.
Oh boy! Can we talk about the games?
We can talk.
Can we talk about superheroes?
We can talk about superheroes.
We've been talking about like hypothetical business things regarding games. Talk about a game where you, go fight a superhero.
But you don't like it.
What do you mean I don't like it?
Well, you can. Matt, why don't you intro the next segment? I think this is perfect.
In this wonderful golden age of streaming media and high definition video, what better way to tease an upcoming highly anticipated video game, but with the graphical overload known as the JPEG image? We got a big, huge, reveal of a much rumored Suicide Squad game from Rocksteady, which featured the crosshairs on Superman's head, because who in the world hasn't wanted to just shoot Superman in the head with a gun? I gotta say, I love Rocksteady. The Arkham games are some of my favorite games of the last generation. I have waited so long to see this game. I felt so much like and they just tweeted it out guy. That's exactly it. Like that is a running theme with DC stuff. And I like DC stuff. I think it's interesting. I also like pageantry, and I like the idea of there being some kind of like pomp and excitement surrounding something. And it's really weird that there's this like track record of you know, like Unite the Seven, the first photo of Aquaman, courtesy of Zack Snyder's Twitter, or oh, here's the screen test for Batman, but you can't see his ears, or oh, hey, here's the Suicide Squad, the JPEG, but it shows Superman instead of which Suicide Squad members are in it. You know, like
here's
remember the
three
sad
logos
Batman?
for Batman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, sad Batman for Batman v Superman, and then for the upcoming Batman game, they still haven't announced. Here's 3 logos 6 months apart.
And like I get it because we're talking about it. It definitely gets people, you know, yapping about it as opposed to picking apart a trailer. And it's probably cheaper to upload an image than whatever else. But it is weird to be like, oh, hey, it's a real thing. Like this could have been such a cool like, and one more thing at the end of one of the many video game presentations that are taking place across this weird year. Presumably, it's going to get a proper reveal during DC Fandom. I hope we. I mean, it would be cool as hell if we got Suicide Squad and also Court of Owls revealed. Don't get me wrong. I want to play this game. I want to find out what this game is. If it find out it's like it's a a battle royale or like a multiplayer Gotham City Imposters type shooter, then I'll probably pass. But if it's a brand new single player Suicide Squad game, then count me in. But that being said, like it's weird to be like, surprise, here is confirmation and a big hint about what the premise is with a JPEG on Twitter.
Yeah, that I mean, just incredibly. This is a very unceremonious year in a lot of ways, like, but that could have been so much more. Like it just feels so weird to have all these theories and conversations pent up for so long about what are they working on next. It's also presumably this has been in development since the original Suicide Squad movie came out in theaters, right? And subsequently,
theoretically, I've definitely
disappointed
heard
millions.
Yeah, I've definitely heard rumors and like scuttlebutt, and nothing that we've ever been able to nail down to report on. But like I've heard enough that essentially they've been working on a DC like Destiny game for a while, where it was, and I think originally the thoughts were that it was Justice League focused, like it was more on the hero side, but because there were also rumors that another studio was working on a Suicide Squad game that got canned, and so this is possibly like taking up the mantle of that. There's a whole lot of like would-be WB games that never happened that could probably fill a book, but I don't know how long the Suicide Squad angle has been in development personally, but yeah, it feels like DC is really like, we need to make sure people still love this brand after that movie just made a lot of money, but no one liked.
It won an Academy Award.
It's true. Yeah, it is the Academy Award winning Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I mean, I hope this isn't a games as a service. On the flip side, this could launch, alongside the next Suicide Squad movie, which potentially looks much better or sounds much better in theory. And Birds of Prey was fun enough, so there's interest there. But yeah, games as a service is not really what I want from.
Flip side, like Suicide Squad is kind of perfect for a battle royale. Like the idea of taking a bunch of people and kicking them out of an airplane and being like, if you die, you die. Have fun down there. Good luck. Like that is the core premise of what Suicide Squad was, but they're all taking on objectives. So if you have some kind of a, cooperative PvE, like, I mean, I guess like permadeath type of situation, that could be fun as hell. Like that could be a really interesting premise for a game, but I can't help but feel like shooting Superman in the head is not really hinting at that. So I don't know what to expect,
Yeah, it's a weird one. I definitely agree with you. I think we'll see more at Fandom. The timing just makes so much sense. But yeah, it's one of those strange, like, boy, I've wanted to know what they've been doing for so long, and now we know we'll be hunting Superman, I guess. Like, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say if it is a battle royale, I really hope that they make it so Rope Guy automatically dies first in every game. Like every single time he's like, I'm Rope Guy, I do rope stuff, and then he dies.
That's I started watching the animated Harley Quinn show because it's on HBO Max now, and they introduced Kite Man basically as like that gig or that joke. It's like, oh, here's Joker and Bane and Two-Face and all these people, and then Kite Man, what do? I have a kite on my back. That's about it. And so yeah, like there's a way that this game could be like really dark, but also funny and like really capture a lot of different tones that I don't think we've seen from a ton of superhero games. Cause there is a lot of self-seriousness to the Batman Arkham games, but yeah, like I love Rocksteady. I think they've made some phenomenal games and I can't wait to see what they do next. It's just between this and the WB Montreal rollout, it's just such an interesting time for like such a wealth of characters for them to have been silent for so long. I want some good DC games, but yeah, we're in such a weird time for them.
I want to shoot Superman in the head. Hate that beloved hero.
I mean, hey, apparently it's too difficult to make a Superman game, so make a game where you gotta hunt him down. It makes sense. But
yeah, sure.
Do you guys think, like, just on the topic before we move off, do you think we'll see other DC games? Obviously, WB Games right now, if they don't sell their studios, has NetherRealm, which, rumors say they might be working on an Injustice game after Mortal Kombat, Monolith, which was doing the Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor games, Montreal, San Francisco. Like, they have a few studios that have been pretty silent for a while. Do you guys think we'll see anything more from them?
I'm honestly I'm dying to see more from WB Games. I really, for the most part, like their output. I feel like when I think like of the third parties, like I think they have like the best track record of like surprising me, both in terms of announcements, but also in terms of like something that I didn't think would be great actually panning out. Like the first Shadow of Mordor game is like so good.
Yeah.
I mean, the second one was good too. I just think it doubled down on the Nemesis stuff, which was less of what made me like that game. But I don't know, like the Lego games are all solid. The Injustice and Mortal Kombat both rule, and it's like they have occasional like weird offshoots there. But I think they also just do some really interesting things with licenses. The fact that it's that WB owns DC and they're like, yeah, go for it, have fun with it. Get weird with it, get excited, play with it, make a video game, go for it.
Yeah, WB has such a huge war chest of IP to work with, whether it's DC, whether it's Lord of the Rings, whether it's Harry Potter, whatever else WB owns. I'm excited to see more from them. I'm the same with you. Like, I know that it wasn't the most critically well received, but there's a lot of fans of the Mad Max game.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like that one.
That was fun as hell.
A fun open world game. Like they put out really good, as you were saying, surprising stuff sometimes. And in an era where most licensed games have gone to mobile, it's nice to have those surprises every few years. I just wish they would be announcing more. So hopefully we'll see more in just a couple of weeks. A couple other things news-wise I just want to mention briefly before we talk about what we're playing. We all thought, or at least on the news team, we all thought Call of Duty 2020 was finally going to be announced this week. Guess what? It was a tease for another tease. Mark Medina on our team, along with a few other people, got crates with a slide projector and a few slides pointing them to an ARG that led people to a website that is now teasing another clue, but it's just going to be a clue on Friday. Some Activision apparently confirmed to some influencers that this is a like multi-step pronged approach to revealing Call of Duty. And I never thought the given game that we get every year would be such a lead up to its announcement. But
yeah, how is we're getting this is for an annualized franchise that already had its logo leaked from a bag of Doritos, but like Batman, the greatest detective on earth, was like, here's a JPEG. Yeah, never mind.
Yeah,
like there's no ARG with the Court of Owls. There's no like trail of clues for like solving the Caped Crusaders' greatest mysteries. But instead they're like, yeah, Call of Duty. What will it come out this year? What could it possibly be? No, don't Google it. By all means, don't check any rumors or like trademark applications or just data
don't go
mining.
to your local Safeway to buy a Doritos bag.
I honestly wish somebody would send me a slide projector. I would like one of those probably more than I would like a new Call of Duty game personally. I don't know how much of a dad thing that is to say, but that'd be fun.
The amount of mess that Medina had to clean up, the amount of like hay it was packaged with, it was like a serious wooden crate that he was mailed. I'm personally happy I didn't have to deal with that at the end of the day. But
promotional hay is a huge commodity in the video game industry. A lot of people don't know about all the promotional hay that gets sent out. We're gonna need a promotional horse for that.
But yeah, I didn't want to let the week go by without mentioning that, just because, apparently this is the latest we've been into a year in many years that a Call of Duty game hasn't been announced. And it's just one of those like oddities that, it's almost September. We still haven't had a.
Yeah, normally we would be like their usual cycle. They'd be about to show off multiplayer any minute now.
Yeah.
They usually do that like going into Gamescom or right before it or during it or whatever. And we don't have a full reveal of anything. So
I think Warzone really changed their plans. Like, obviously that was going to be big, but it was so big at the beginning of this year. And I think they've kind of put a lot of eggs in that basket. Understandably, might as well lean into what's working. Other quick news hits for the week, just to mention, because it's the biggest game our audience cares about that we probably won't see for a few years, but BioShock 4, the job listings for it indicate it won't take place in Rapture or Columbia. Personally, like, I'm a huge BioShock franchise fan. I think they'll probably find a way to go back to Rapture or Columbia given the franchise's history, but I think with this being a new team, with it not being led by Ken Levine, I think if they're going to continue BioShock as a series, making their own mark, letting this team put their own stamp on it is probably the best way to go. And, obviously when they revisited Rapture in BioShock 2 and it wasn't the main team making it, the biggest thing people knocked it for was like, well, it's not as good as the first one. So I think starting something new, starting something fresh is probably the best chance this game will have for like being memorable to the audience.
It's weird that that's like a beloved trilogy that has 2 settings.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would be extremely annoyed if they were like, great news, you're going back to Rapture. I'd be like, I've been there. It's fine.
Yeah. Spent a lot of time there.
It's weird to put that in the job listing. That seems like unnecessary details that you could probably tell somebody over like, in a job interview or like over the phone or something.
Yeah, I mean, the news of this BioShock happening, other than a Kotaku report, most of the info was coming from the job listings that kind of accidentally indicated it was a BioShock game. So that's the new place to find news these days. Also, briefly wanted to mention Last of Us Part 2 is getting an update this week. It's going to get the grounded difficulty, which was the hardest difficulty in the original game. It's now finally coming to this one, as well as a permadeath mode. So you can tackle individual chapters, locations, like chunks of the game, or the entire game with a permadeath run. So if you die, the game ends. There's a few screenshots online to show you kind of like how it keeps track of your stats and everything. But there's also just a whole bunch of modifiers that they're adding to the game as well. Visual things that you can do for photo mode and whatnot, more accessibility improvements, all that sort of stuff, it's great to see for a game that I'm not expecting DLC for. I think it's really interesting that we've seen this generation God of War, Spider-Man granted had its DLC, but God of War, Spider-Man, and Days Gone to a certain extent all had like really big news hits just on like patch updates. Like,
yeah.
Sony has found a way to eventize patch updates for New Game Plus or for new difficulty modes or things like that in a really smart way, where they've become almost as important as big DLC updates.
It's interesting too, because it's like, I don't know, back in my day, those things were just there at the start. But I was like, when they said they're adding New Game Plus to, God of War, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So people have another excuse to play that. Personally, with The Last of Us 2, I adored it, and I don't ever need to play it again because it wrecked me. But like going through on the hardest difficulty is definitely an awesome challenge for fans. Adding new trophies is super cool for people, super interested in that game. So yeah, like, I mean, within a week we got harder modes added to Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us 2, which is like, that rules. Like, I don't know, I love hard games here and there. So that's super cool. Keep doing that.
Yeah, it's
maybe
really
launch
cool
with
to
them
see
now.
them. Yeah. But then, hey, they get another press beat out of it, like right now. So I get the marketing side of it for sure. But anyway, other than that, the other news thing I wanted to mention briefly is just Fall Guys, which is what I pretty much played all weekend. They're getting their first big post-launch update. They're not adding, I know there's no invert camera controls yet, unfortunately, for people on PS4. That doesn't matter for me. I've been winning just fine. But if you do want to see what they're updating, there's a full list of stuff in a Twitter thread, also on IGN.com, but they're adding in a new game that was there in the PC betas that hasn't been in the game since launch. They're changing up some of the balancing issues, one of them being one of the final games you can get, which is like Royal Fumble, I think, where you have to chase people. Only one person has a tail and you have to have the tail at the end of it. That will show up less, which is great because I suck at that game.
That one sucks. I lost my first round at that because I had a cosmetic wolf costume on, which had a tail, but I hadn't paid attention to that. And so I was like, just be like, hell yeah, I got my tail. I'm ready to go. And then I didn't realize it was like a fancy little raccoon tail you're supposed to find.
That happened to me. I put that costume on, and for the first minute of a match, I was like, I'm cool. No one's chasing me. I'm in the corner just hanging out. I'm going to win this. And then I saw the two other people run by, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no. But I've been having a ton of fun with Fall Guys. They haven't released PS Plus numbers, but they hit 2 million sales on Steam. Obviously, it was free on PS Plus. They seem to be doing well, and it's definitely well deserved. It's a really fun game. But speaking of games that we've been playing, I did want to hear from you guys. What have you guys been playing much in these weird August times where it's kind of the lull in between the big summer releases and the big fall releases?
I jumped into the Avengers beta this weekend and kind of immediately had deja vu to playing the original Destiny beta whenever that was. I guess that was on PS4.
Yeah, it was.
Like PS4 was already out, but there wasn't much going on, and it was just this. Yeah,
they released it during an E3 show. I remember.
Right.
Like the first version of it came out during an E3.
But yeah, I like jumped into that. I mean this in sort of like a, I don't know. This game is definitely not for me. I think it's competently made, but it totally feels like one of those things that was sort of grown in a lab to appeal to a specific type of very wide audience. Like it has collectible loot, it has elements for crafting, it has a hub thing with mission select. Like it, I don't know. It feels very, very Destiny-ish, which is exactly what it's setting out to do. So I can't really fault it on that front. But I guess I was just sort of hoping it would wow me a little bit more. Also, there's something like I remember when they first showed off their fairly underwhelming E3 reveal last year, and I was just like, this looks a lot like a tutorial. And then lo and behold, it was the tutorial, which I just feel like is sort of the weirdest way to get your game off on the right foot, is to just be like, here's the part that no one likes because it just teaches you how to use buttons. I don't know. Like I messed around with it, and it is exactly a video game. It is one big, huge video game. And I just like, I like Marvel stuff, but I'm sort of fair weather about the Avengers. So I'm not like super let down. Like if they were like, this is the new Spider-Man game, I'd be like, no, thank you. But,
or the X-Men.
Yeah. If this was X-Men, I'd be crying, but, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. They're definitely like, I've played for 2 weekends now, cause we had some early access for a press beta. But it was, I definitely enjoyed moments, and there's like a part of my brain where I'm like, oh yeah, it's really fun to see Kamala's foot get huge and kick an enemy into the wall, or Iron Man's rockets to shoot and knock 2 enemies out of the air. But I liked the campaign missions enough that I want to see those, but it's because they were bespoke to the heroes you're playing as. Like when the game has to accommodate 6+ heroes, it starts to be like, well, anything's interchangeable at that point, seemingly. So what matters?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's like the sort of quality of the craftsmanship of the game is really what is just kind of salt in the wound, because the fact that it is like it's a really gorgeous Hulk model, and when he punches stuff, it feels pretty good. I just hate that you're punching a bunch of generic robots repeatedly and numbers are flying out of them, and it's like, oh, it's all to level up your light level or whatever. And like Kamala Khan is awesome. Like her abilities are really cool. It's just sort of like, it would be so awesome if that was in a game that was just about this character, and I know that's just griping about a beta for a game that I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to. And I don't mean to poo poo it, but like we saw this one coming. I think like this is them trying to make a big, huge, massively successful AAA shared world video game. And it's like, I guess another thing is that I just wish that like there was a point in time where like licensed games typically really sucked, but occasionally you'd have those weird gems that would come along that were surprisingly good despite being kind of crapped out for a holiday release. And now it seems like license holders kind of like they got more careful with it, and they're like, oh no, we have a AAA brand like Avengers or Star Wars or whatever, and like we really want it to be just, we got to make it special. It's got to be amazing. It's got to appeal to absolutely everybody. And so instead of getting like a bunch of like weird games every couple of years that sometimes are terrible and sometimes are like so-so or like fun, we get like these micromanaged, super refined, all of the pointy edges are filed off. Like I'm thinking also of sort of Battlefront 2, which I liked Battlefront 1 a lot. It felt kind of light on features, but then when Star Wars Battlefront 2 came out, it felt like they were just trying to check every possible box. Like they were like, this is a multiplayer shooter, but it's also a hero shooter. And also it has loot boxes and it's cosmetic, but the cosmetics don't affect your stats, but you do have cards that do affect your stats. And it was just like,
it took years for them to sort of let their guard down and get a little weird with that game.
Yeah. Sure. And it was, I mean, it's that level of like, oh, you can't do anything that would possibly even accidentally besmirch the brand by not taking it seriously enough. And it's like, I don't know. I grew up with like crappy LucasArts games that were often like kind of great because of how like nobody was paying too close attention to them. Like they're like, yeah, this is the hidden Sam and Max head in this level. Go find it. Or like, type in a Wookiee roar and you get a cheat or whatever.
I always go back to trust me, I don't think it was the best RPG of its time or anything, but like as a kid, the third Harry Potter game for GBA, the Prisoner of Azkaban game, was a turn-based RPG, like a pixel art isometric turn-based RPG. And that just was like weird and out of nowhere because they, had limitations, but that would never get made today. And I'm totally there
I
with
miss
you.
that.
Like needing to appeal to everyone means there is some really great stuff in here, and like you said, like there is some very clear like craftsmanship going on in this game. But yeah, it by appealing to everyone, you end up sometimes not appealing to the core base that might matter. And it's going to be interesting to see, I think, how the launch of this game goes, because I do think I've said this a lot. No matter how it is at the beginning, they are going to support this game. Like the Avengers is one of the biggest entertainment properties out there right now. They are going to make sure this game has a life to it, and so like I'm excited to check back in a year to see. What
I think that's like that's the other thing is that I want, comparing it back to Destiny, is I burned through like the both like the alpha and the beta, and then when the game came out I played it at launch and it didn't have like anything really going for it, and then by the time like whatever the Iron Crusade or Taken King or like whatever the first big update came out and everyone's like now it's really good, I was like I'm over it, I'm done, so maybe I'll just like peace out and wait a year and then be like, oh, they've added Moon Knight or whatever and I can go and see what's going on there. But yeah, it's weird in terms of like the AAA approach to licensed games. It seems like you either get these massive multi-year games as a service, or these like big huge like AAA launches that really have to deliver on all possible fronts, and then anything smaller than that is just like free to play mobile shovelware. There's no room to sell a video game that's just, which makes me happy that we're seeing stuff like Jedi Fallen Order and Star Wars Squadrons, like smaller, more focused ideas. But yeah, it's also weird that we got the Avengers movie after they'd been building up to that for so long. Like they'd really earned the right to do that, and this is just coming out with like 5 to 6 heroes depending on which platform you're on. And part of me is like, well, what if we had a great Hawkeye game and a great Black Widow game and a great Hulk game, and
it instantly made me want a game for each of them, because it was like starting to play the Black Widow skill set. It's like, oh, I really like this grappling hook mixed in with her invisibility. I just want to play a campaign on that. I just want to play a campaign with Iron Man skills. We're definitely reserving full judgment. And I know there's been some discussion about the review in progress that's on IGN. Definitely read all of Tom's thoughts about the game. He wrote 3,000 words about a thing he is very, thinks there's good in, but also thinks there's a lot that needs to be worked on. And obviously he's holding full judgment. There is no score on that thing. He's holding full judgment till the full game comes out. But definitely read all his thoughts. Obviously we'll be keeping an eye on it as it goes into launch. But yeah, it is a very strange one.
Yeah, this is, I don't think anybody should sort of feel bad about being critical or judgmental or praising this beta, because that's literally why it exists, right? Like it exists for players to engage with and enjoy, and if they don't like it, to leave feedback, which the developers said that they're reading, they're watching, they're combing through YouTubers and comments and stuff like that. And I think that's awesome, because this is definitely going to be a living, growing thing for a very long time. But it also sort of feels Vegas buffet versus Miles Morales, which is like a nice single thing of food that I'm like a cheeseburger or a steak, where I know it's going to be awesome.
I was just gonna say, it's so strange because I've spoken to a lot of the devs for the IGN first, and there's definitely a lot of like love for Marvel franchises and love for wanting to get this right. And Crystal is a really great developer. Like they're coming off of 2 really, really strong Tomb Raider games that everyone loved. And so it's just such a strange place. And like, I know the talent is there. I know the passion is there. I do just think it is like trying to please too many masters. And so at the end of the day, it's like to do a lot of work.
To reiterate, like, I don't think it's bad by any means. Like, I think that a lot of people are going to have a really good time with it. And I think it's incredibly well made. I just think the fundamental concept of what it is and what it's trying to do is directly, specifically not for me, or not something that I'm interested in, which is just, like I can recognize that. And I can be like, well, oh, well, shucks.
If, before
we play the Hulk movie tie-in game from 2003,
go play Hulk Ultimate Destruction. Who would you want to make an X-Men game?
God, don't ask me that.
Okay, think about it for next week, because I've been thinking about it a lot ever since I like.
Here's what I want. Like, if we got to make a big, huge game that's appeal to everybody, give me a Secret Wars game where it's just it's squads of, it's like a battle royale but with superheroes. Like, do like an Overwatch approach where they really flesh out these characters and give them like class-based stuff, and then they're being transported to a funky island by the Beyonder and they all have to fight each other, and then
I'd watch that, or I play that. Even Mojo puts them in crazy games, and we see what.
Yeah, honestly, I think the problem with any kind of game based on a superhero team is that you've got to balance out that many superheroes, and it's why Spider-Man and Batman work better as video game protagonists, because they're one person to figure out. Like, I don't know how you make a good X-Men game. It's kind of
well,
tough.
They're also, like, I think those characters specifically lend themselves to the sort of the golden loop of video games, which is, accessing new stuff by conquesting opponents and improving your character, and rinse and repeat. Like, Spider-Man gets new costumes and new gadgets and stuff like that, and Batman is full of things like that, and the Hulk gets shorts.
You're changing out his rib cage in this game. His gear is his wrists and his rib cage. It's
so stuff like that is like, I mean, they made it, they're making it work, but I do think that, like, some things lend themselves a lot better than others. And there's for sure, like, I don't know, I'm with Max in that, like, I think you have to either go kind of like goofy over the top with X-Men, which is, I think, what the like the Lego games can do, what the Ultimate Alliance games can do, stuff like that. I think that works. But I would love to see, like, a really painstakingly, taken care of approach to Wolverine as a third person single player game, running on next gen consoles. Throw that to Naughty Dog, or throw that to FromSoft, or throw it to Insomniac, like Sucker Punch. Like, take a character like that and make a Gambit game, make a make a Magneto game. Like, there's so much there that you could do.
It's also, I think, like, trying to make a big AAA game again, it's really tricky because you have so many more bits and pieces to worry about. But, like, what about just like a smaller 2.5D game? Like, give me the original X-Men class, but it's by the guys who did Trine, and they have to solve, like, weird puzzles. And it's like, some of them you have to move a boulder with Beast, and other things Angel has to fly up, and oh no, like, Iceman will freeze this wall. Like, just
I would keep it simple. I would absolutely love, like, a reboot of the X-Men arcade game for Genesis, but like co-op multiplayer with more puzzles. That's pretty brilliant.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
There's a room for small superhero games, smaller scale superhero games, and we're just not seeing that right now. And as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, that would totally work. There's the Trine devs, the Way Forward obviously could do quite a bit. Yeah, there's a lot of devs who could totally tackle that stuff, and I hope we see that in the future, even though next gen is all about making bigger and prettier things.
God, a Way Forward Gambit game, like, that was like a Metroidvania, would be so damn cool.
That'd be great. God, we just need to do an X-Men wish list episode. But anyway, before we wrap up, Brian, I know you're not playing much, but just briefly, how is your watch through of is it the top 200 horror movies of all time?
I'm trying to watch every horror movie that I hadn't watched. Like, horror is my favorite film genre, but there's I'm realizing there's a lot of blanks, and there's a lot of blank time now, since I'm not on 50 airplanes this year. So yeah, I've just been going through watching everything. I watched Jacob's Ladder right now.
Hell yeah.
Just yesterday, which,
that movie's so good.
Oh my God, that movie messed me up.
So good.
Yeah, I'm on Letterboxd if you want to follow me there.
Okay.
But yeah, I've watched 135 movies this year, which is pretty awesome. And I think I have like 40 or 50 left on my list of horror movies to watch through. I'm watching through classics like Bride of Frankenstein, Nosferatu. 1932 was 1930 to 1935 was a goddamn amazing time for horror. Holy crap. Yeah, just going through fun stuff. Nice. It's been really, really cool.
Yeah, I save it for another episode because I know we're running out of time. But I actually finally watched Midsummer for the first time.
Ooh, yeah.
Randomly, just like 2 or 3 nights ago, we were on Amazon. We're like, want to watch Midsummer? And then my girlfriend just clicked it, and I'm like, is this a game? Like, am I supposed to say no? We'll watch something nicer right now, and then we just watched the whole movie. So that was an interesting way to spend a Friday night amidst all of this. I will say I really enjoyed it. I wasn't scared. Like, I was never.
No, it's just deeply upsetting.
Yeah, it was like I think I heard so many things about how moving the experience of watching it was going to be that I kept waiting to be like just freaked out to no end, and that never quite happened for me. But like I enjoyed it a lot. I thought like the balance of the fact that it was sunny so much, like for an unnerving, tense film, was such a great juxtaposition. But yeah, it was that like unknowable something has to come out of frame, or like something's in the background that I'm not noticing, or just knowing that like all this nature could at any point lead to something shocking was a really nice, unexpected.
You should watch the original Wicker Man after that, because I think
I've never seen that one.
Obviously, incredibly tonally similar beats in terms of quaint small town horror stuff. But it's man. I don't know. I love both those movies.
And then watch the Nicolas Cage Wicker Man, where there's like birds hiding in death and stuff. They get covered with bees.
Yeah, that'll be one of those things where you'd be like, I've seen GIFs of this for years, and now I can put a name to the face.
Oh yeah, I've seen his Not the Bees scene more than I've seen most Nicolas Cage performances, like runtime. But I think we should definitely save some horror talk for once Lucy is back on the show as well. But I think that's going to pretty much wrap us up for the week. That's about everything PlayStation-wise I can think of now that we're onto the horror movie beat. I do want to mention, because this is something that we had talked about before the show, and Max, if you're willing to have it for next week or the week after, that would be rad. But obviously we put up our top 25 PS4 list. It's now been updated for, as far as we know, every major first party PlayStation game that's going to come out this generation is out. So we updated the IGN staff list of top 25 PS4 games. Basically like if you're buying a PS4, here's the 25 games you should go jump into right now. But of course, it's a bunch of different opinions all wrapped up into one list, and we all have our differing top games list. And so we had kind of joked about it last week, but we talked about it on, Slack off the air. And I'm totally down for all of us to kind of bring our like top 10, top 25, however many we want to do PS4 games lists to this show every week for the next few weeks. And kind of talk about, the games.
I wrote out my top 10. I'm pretty excited about it. It's nice. It's just sort of like a little trip down memory lane of like, oh yeah, the last 7 years have had a lot of great games. And yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how mad Red is going to get at me if we kept going, but
no, we can stop. But we can do it next week.
We'll definitely make time for that next week. But yeah, I think the core cast and a few of the regular guests will bring on our top lists, and then look back, because there's a lot of games still coming out this fall, but sort of look at what we've loved from the last gen. Because as Max was saying, a lot of really good games came out this generation. It's nice to go back and think about all that before we jump into the next generation and forget this one ever happened. But before we do that, of course, we'll have many more weeks to come of Podcast Beyond ahead of the PS5 launch. So thank you so much for listening or watching this episode, listening to or watching this episode. Thank you to Max and Brian for joining me for this week. And thank you to Red, our producer. Beyond is normally live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific at beyond.ign.com, youtube.com/IGNBeyond, and your favorite podcast services around the world. Remember, please write in with how many dangling participles you thought happened in this episode, and we'll reveal the correct tally next week, I'm sure. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to our crazy shenanigans. We hope you're safe. We hope you're well. And as always, beyond.
Beyond.